as he set the stage in terms of email intelligence and leveraging AI and different connector layers that can give you insight, which is quite frankly foresight. I'm going to talk a little bit about our firm. I think we've only got a couple slides in here. So SalesChoice, we really specialize in AI for sales enablement for guided selling. And so we do a number of different use cases. The one here is on account scoring. So we, in our platform, overlay on top of Salesforce. And obviously, relationship health is key. In here, we really look at, the activity utilization, the drip that's coming from that can yield, obviously, increased revenue flow or making plan. And we use AI to prioritize all the opportunities. So on an account level, they get scored, and our opportunities have a score as well. And it allows companies to really ensure that they're focused on their higher yields. In today's world, sales professionals and B2B's productivity has been declining. And so focus in our distracted economy is kind of at an all-intensity side. And where Julian's platform can come into play and where there's some nice intersection points is you don't want to be spending time covering relationships in your email marketing campaigns or in your sales reach outs that really have weak, I'd call it strong signals that, these aren't the best players. And downstream, right, the acquisition of a customer and all that investment, a sales cycle, might as well focus in on coverage where you've got positive signals on the insights you can have from the email. And that can also come into an account as an account risk score. So, there's going to be, I think, a lot of consolidation in the market as different players recognize that all these signals tell a story over a period of time. So, Julian, what are you finding in the market in terms of the industries? Obviously you highlighted a number of them before, but are there other segments that are adopting or, with higher speed ratio? Obviously I think of financial services, high volume transactions, companies like Shopify, e-commerce. But are you seeing that there's, your business is distributed, or are there certain segments that are just, rocking?
Yeah, a great question. We're seeing quite a bit of variety in terms of different verticals that are adopting our services. Everything from banking to lending, money transfer companies, anything to do with P2P kind of money transfer. These are great kind of indicators in terms of the types of businesses that are leveraging us. In the e-commerce world, you mentioned Shopify, a lot of great, independent online retailers as well have looked at us leveraging what we do, and of course the big box chains as well. And another interesting vertical that we do see some traction with, especially as of late, is the online travel agencies and airlines. So the airline industries, we're fortunate to work with some of the largest global players in that space, as well as some of the online travel agencies that you and I would book some of our travel with. These agencies are realizing that a lot of business is being booked with them, some last minute tickets, sometimes they do work with the credit card companies to process these, and they're getting hit with merchant chargebacks. So as you may know, when an individual calls to their credit card company and it realizes both perhaps that their transaction is fraudulent, or perhaps somebody calls in and just claims that it's fraudulent, they're being hit back with this fraud charge, and that can add up quite quickly when you're seeing a few thousand dollars hit your books. And for that matter, when we've got a lower cost scalable solution, this really comes into play for that online travel agency and other verticals as well. So on the next slide, we're going to see just very briefly some of the names that have, not here really to brag or give us any, clout in that sense, but really have these great companies have put us through the ringer in terms of, their compliance and regulation and privacy needs and the hurdles that we've had to jump through in order to work with such, recognizable names. So, take a moment, have a look at this, and, let me know if you've got any questions on this too, Cindy.
Great. Well, as Julian mentioned, please submit your questions because we'll soon be at that point in our dialogue today. So, Julian, I think we can both play on this one a little bit, but what do you think are the major benefits for applying risk and integrating customer profile data immediately into a business workflow? Any thoughts on that?
Sure do. Yes, this is kind of our day-to-day value proposition for the folks that we work with. So this is both, it comes back to kind of our use case and why they're beneficial. For us, we work very, very well in the early onboarding stage of a new customer. As we mentioned before, we also look at some of the existing customer information that allows us to give the companies that we work with some certainty on who the returning customer is. So we can say with certainty that either this person that is coming logging back into your platform is indeed who they are by looking at their IP address, by looking at what device they're coming in from, whether a smartphone or home computer. If we've seen these similar markers before, we can say, great, there's no risk, real-time risk of an account takeover, for example, or a fraudster to get in there and change their email address and communication information, and that way they can't take over your account, right? So we're minimizing that. So those two use cases, as well as other ways to kind of look at, not only the card not present real-time transaction authentication, but also the ability to look at some of the companies out there that have loyalty programs in place. So when you look at things such as Aeroplan or any type of gas station loyalty rewards card, these type of programs oftentimes can be games or different ways of trying to increase your points, and fraudsters love to target these as well. And even in terms of transferring points, if a fraudster finds ways to breach that and compromise the program, you could be losing a lot of money on behalf of the company. So just wanted to point those out.
So one of the questions at the back of my mind, and I thank you for that, Julian, is, obviously the big brands, nobody wants risk in their, in their business models. What percentage of all the transactions are you finding that what percent of frauds are happening and across, because you've got the ban. So I'm just curious, can you just comment, like, is it 1% across that is potentially fraudulent? Is there certain industries that have higher ratios? I don't have a sense of, I know there's lots of fraudsters out there, but I'm sure the audience wonder, well, how bad is it? And is it growing? And it's,
Right.
I don't have any strategic context there. I haven't played too many fraudsters, I hope.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I know you and I have probably both gotten these, odd calls on our phones and, people trying to do the phone scam, but it's a little different when you're dealing online. And, for that matter as well, fraud and the signatures of what types of fraud occur in different industries are both unique in that sense as well. So when we look at fraud across different industries, the fraud that we'll see in the airline industry will of course be different from what we're seeing in e-commerce, and we take note of that in the way we apply unique different rule sets that can be customized at your company level. But to give you a sense of the size of this problem that is really being growing in scope, in the past 7 years since Emailage has been in business, we've looked at over $4 billion of fraudulent purchases online, and these are just the fraudulent purchases. So we've transacted billions and billions of dollars of transactions online to be able to actually see this amount. And in the last 12 months alone, a staggering, I guess, $19 million of fraud was prevented through our network as well. So that kind of gives you the macro view. And when we distill that down to the different verticals and what we're seeing, you know, and what type of level of fraud is good or bad at different industry levels. Well, it does vary. Just as the signature of the fraud varies, so does the actual risk volumes or the volumes of fraudulent transactions that are being targeted. And you got to remember, at the end of the day, these are human individuals that are typically behind the attacks and the different, you know, targets. So they'll shift around and move once they find, you know, the low-lying fruit and the different ways of conducting these frauds. So to give you an example, the financial industry, you know, has had its fair share of you know, fraud associated to it. And typically, you know, banks for that matter are really trying to keep their fraud numbers below 1% or well below 1%, right? Exceptions do occur in the card industry in terms of, you know, credit card transactions and e-commerce. What we're trying to do for them is really push through a significant portion of their volumes of transactions immediately based on good signals around that individual transacting. And with new regulations and PSD2 directives, there's going to be more regulation put both on the merchant and processor side that will kind of be a crucial element for us to play in, and an environment to play in. So for them, you know, a lot of times we'll see volumes of 50% of their traffic being pushed through, and you want to have, you know, a lot of that good transaction go through so that you're minimizing the manual review that occurs. And of course, those are onerous and costly endeavors. So hopefully that answers a bit of the question.
Yeah, I think well, it's very clear the ROI is significant, and also very clear that this market is still growing, and obviously with the proliferation of data and so much of our communication is through email, you know, these days it's still the killer app, right, in terms of communication modality, although texting is right up there for sure, but it's correlated to an email. So, you know, I guess the pathway is there. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the risk assessment capabilities in terms of e-com? And
sure.
I know you had some points that you wanted to stress here.
Sure, yeah, and as kind of alluded to just prior, I mean, these are some of the use cases that are big for us in e-commerce. You know, we're able to look at these CNP, card not present transactions, and what really that CNP acronym stands for is the card not present. So it's the retailer doing business online where you have a customer that's signed up, but you don't see them presently. You can't verify the card in person. So it means essentially that the card is not there in person. And you're kind of going on a trust basis for the most part. And you know, this is where really the merchants that are processing these transactions or you know, approving these transactions have to deal with the processor to try to ensure that this individual that has come through their doors are who they say they are. So they get hit with the chargeback transactions quite often, and we play just a great role there. We also work with different kind of mid-layer platforms such as Visa, CyberSource, MasterCards that certify, and Experian. So many different mid-layer platforms of large credit card institutions will leverage our signals into their platform as well, so that their merchants, their businesses that they work with are also, you know, well protected or have another layer of protection. So that's kind of the use case in the e-commerce world. And next slide. More on the technology side of things, or technology platforms, and this really kind of I've used this as a broad umbrella to capture both, you know, the financial and online transaction platforms. Here we're seeing a lot of use cases primarily in the account opening and account maintenance side. The trust and safety is another issue where, you know, for different review sites, we can help minimize account abuse or abuse towards different users online. So that's a way that where we're able to minimize kind of bad behavior that you don't want to degrade the goodwill built up on your site, as well as the loyalty and fraud aspect that we touched on earlier in terms of different points reward systems or new technology platforms that are launching, such as some of these credit card applications that we're seeing out there that offer different rewards, and how to kind of ensure that their ecosystem is also secure. So that kind of rounds out with all the different things for myself.
Thanks.